The bowl slipped from her hand, and the next second it was flying at my face. I felt the shock of scalding liquid, hotter than any burn I'd ever known. My own daughter had hurled a bowl of chicken soup at me, simply because I had forgotten the salt. The soup stung my eyes, seared my cheeks, and ran down my neck into the collar of my faded blouse. I stumbled back against the kitchen counter, one hand clutching the old towel I used for everything. The floor was wet with broth, yellowish stains mixing with drops of red where the skin on my chin had split open. Lauren stood above me, arms crossed, face calm, as though she had just swatted at a fly. Her silence was heavier than any scream. She didn't apologize, didn't even blink. She turned her back and walked toward the hallway, the sound of her heels steady and unhurried. Halfway up the stairs, she said only 2 words over her shoulder. "No salt." Then the door slammed, and she left me standing in my own kitchen, dripping, trembling, smelling of chicken fat and humiliation. I pressed the towel to my cheek, trying to stop the sting. The terry cloth was old, rough, and smelled faintly of bleach, but it was all I had. The mirror above the sink showed a woman I could barely recognize. My face was red and blotched, my gray hair damp and sticking to my forehead. My hands shook so much I could hardly hold the towel in place. At 61, after a lifetime of serving my family, of working 40 years in a law office, I had never been reduced to this. Bleeding in my own kitchen because my daughter demanded more salt. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Crying would mean she had won again. Instead, I dropped to my knees, scrubbing the soup from the tiles before it set in. My hands burned, my knees throbbed, but I scrubbed anyway. I thought, if I clean fast enough, maybe it will feel like none of this ever happened. Maybe I can erase the moment when my daughter chose to treat me like nothing. But the smell of broth clung to me, and the burn on my skin kept reminding me there was no erasing this night. I whispered to myself, she threw soup at me. My own daughter threw soup at me for forgetting salt. Saying it out loud made it heavier, more real. The kitchen that once smelled of Sunday dinners and family holidays now reeked of shame. That night I lay awake in bed with the towel still pressed to my cheek, the sheets stiff with dried broth where I had tried to lie still. Upstairs I could hear Lauren's steady breathing, deep and unconcerned, as though nothing at all had happened. And maybe, for her, nothing had. For her, I was just an old woman, too weak to resist, too dependent to leave. The next morning, I would learn just how far she intended to push me. She would stand in that same kitchen, dressed in her beige business suit, her lips curled into a sneer, and order me to hide my wounds. She would invite her colleagues over, with that fake sweetness in her voice, telling me to smile. Through the pain, she would put a $70 concealer on the table and say, "Cover the burns and smile." And when she walked into her boss's office later that day, I would see her own smile collapse. Her legs would tremble, her face would drain of color, because for the first time, the truth would no longer be mine to hide. But on that night, I didn't know all of that. I only knew the sting of soup, the shame of silence, and the weight of being treated like a servant in my own home. And now I need you with me in this story, because it isn't just about soup. It's about what happens when silence ends, when the secrets people think they can bury finally rise into the light. If you stay, you'll see how far a mother can fall and how far she can climb back. So don't go anywhere. Stay with me until the end. The sun poured into my kitchen like nothing had happened the night before. The light made the linoleum shine, but I still saw the faint stains of broth on the tiles. My cheek throbbed under a thin layer of drugstore ointment, but I moved quickly, whisking eggs in a bowl with a fork that rattled in my trembling hand. Behind me, I heard her voice. "Breakfast." Now Lauren sat at the table, calm, polished, dressed in her beige business suit. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, her phone resting on the table beside a leather folder. She didn't glance at me. She didn't need to. Her tone was enough. She was the executive, and I was the maid. I plated scrambled eggs and poured coffee into her favorite white mug, the one with the gold trim she had chosen for herself. She tapped the table impatiently, scrolling through emails. She didn't even look up when I set the plate in front of her. "Toast," she said. Just that one word. I slid slices of bread into the toaster, my hands still trembling. I tried to hold them steady, but the effort only made the tremors worse. When the toaster clicked, I buttered the bread and set it down gently beside her plate. She took a bite, chewed, and finally raised her eyes to me. Her gaze was cold, detached. That was when the doorbell rang. Lauren smiled suddenly, as though she had a switch for her expressions. She rose and walked briskly to the door. When she opened it, a young woman in a green dress stepped inside. Maya, her colleague from the marketing department. "Mrs. Miller," Maya sang, her tone honey-sweet. "It smells so good in here. You always make the best breakfast." She kissed my cheek lightly, but her eyes darted quickly over the burn on my face before sliding away. She didn't mention it, she didn't ask. She just slipped her purse onto a chair and settled in like she belonged. Lauren poured her a cup of coffee, as if she were the gracious hostess. Then she turned to me, pulling something from her handbag. A sleek little box, pale pink, with a golden logo. She dropped it onto the counter in front of me. $70, she said flatly. Imported. Concealer. Cover the burns. I froze, staring at the box. My face burned under the ointment and my heart pounded. Cover the burns. Not heal them, not treat them. Just hide them. Lauren's lips curled into a smirk as she added, "Maya's bringing a few girls from the office over for lunch. I don't want them to see you like that." Cover the burns and smile, Maya giggled, sipping her coffee, pretending not to hear the cruelty in those words. I wanted to protest. I wanted to shout that this was my home, that I wasn't her servant, that I would not be paraded around like a prop for her false image. But the words stayed lodged in my throat. My hands picked up the little box instead, my fingers clumsy as I turned it over. $70. More than 2 weeks of the allowance she permitted me from my own pension. I caught sight of myself in the reflection of the microwave door. Gray hair frizzed around my face, dark circles under my eyes, the angry burn stretching across my cheek. And I saw Lauren behind me, tall and sharp, her beige suit immaculate, her arms folded as she waited for me to comply. She had taken control of everything, my house, my retirement savings, my daily routine, even my reflection. Maya's voice floated through the kitchen again. "It'll be fun, Mrs. Miller. Just a casual lunch. Everyone will love you." Her tone was sugar, but I knew the truth. She didn't care. She was playing along just as Lauren wanted. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a backdrop. I walked to the bathroom and opened the concealer. The smell was chemical, heavy, foreign. I dabbed it onto my cheek, wincing as it stung. In the mirror, the burn disappeared under a smooth beige mask, but the pain was still there. The humiliation was still there. When I came back into the kitchen, Lauren nodded, satisfied. "Better," she said. Then she sipped her coffee and turned back to her phone as though nothing in the world was out of place. I stood there, silent, my hands empty. I thought about the years I had spent raising her, the nights I had stayed up ironing her ballet costumes, the weekends I had skipped outings so she could have piano lessons. I thought about how I had believed those sacrifices would buy her kindness, and now she sat at my kitchen table, ordering me to hide my wounds like they were stains on a wall. But deep inside me, something shifted. A small spark, a whisper I hadn't heard in years. A thought, this cannot go on forever. I tucked that thought away, quietly, carefully, because for now, I was still under her rule. But one day, I told myself, there would be a reckoning. It had been almost 2 years since she came back. I remember the night clearly, because the rain was beating against the windows like it wanted to get in. I was already in my nightgown, closing the curtains, when the knocking started. 3 sharp raps on the front door, heavy and desperate. I hurried down the hallway, clutching my robe around me, and when I opened the door, there she was, my daughter, Lauren, standing in the glow of the porch light with a suitcase at her feet. Her hair was damp, plastered against her forehead. Mascara streaked her cheeks. She looked smaller than I remembered, her shoulders sagging, her lips trembling. "Mom," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. I don't have anywhere else to go." I pulled her into my arms, feeling the wet fabric of her trench coat soak through my nightgown, but I didn't care. She was my only child, and she was crying like a girl again. She told me her marriage had ended, that her husband had left her, that she had no savings, no apartment, no plan. She said the words I had longed to hear. "Mom, I need you." I told her she would always have a home here. I dragged her suitcase inside and warmed up leftovers from the fridge. She sat at the table like she had as a teenager, slouching, sniffing, spooning mac and cheese into her mouth as if nothing had changed. I tucked an Afghan around her shoulders on the couch and told her she could stay as long as she needed. And when she fell asleep, I tiptoed upstairs, smiling to myself. Maybe this was our second chance. The first weeks felt almost like a blessing. She went shopping with me on Saturdays, pushing the cart, teasing me for choosing store brands. She carried laundry baskets up from the basement, reaching for the heavy loads I used to dread. On Sunday mornings, she brewed coffee before I even got out of bed, the aroma drifting through the house the way it used to when her father still lived with us. One night, we even watched a movie together. She curled up in the armchair with her blanket while I sat on the sofa. We laughed at the same jokes. She leaned her head back and said, "This feels nice, Mom." And my heart swelled because for a moment, she wasn't the hardened woman the world had shaped. She was my little girl again. Neighbors noticed too. Mrs. Caldwell stopped by with muffins and said, "It's good to see you two together again." I smiled, embarrassed by how proud I felt. Emily, my sister, called and I told her, "Lauren's back home for a while." "It's good, really good," Emily just hummed skeptically, but I ignored it. I wanted to believe in the miracle. For a while, I let myself think everything could be mended. I set the table with 2 placemats instead of 1. I bought her favorite cereal. I let her fill the fridge with little luxuries I never used to buy: sparkling water, imported cheese, fancy yogurt in glass jars. I told myself she deserved comfort after what she had been through. I even pulled my savings to help her restart. She said she needed a new phone for work, and I handed her my card without hesitation. She said she couldn't show up to interviews in old clothes, so I drove her to the mall and watched her step out of fitting rooms in sleek skirts and pressed blouses, spinning in the mirror. "How do I look, Mom?" she asked, and I said beautiful every time. I thought I was investing in her future. I thought I was giving her the tools to rise again. But somewhere in that first month, a faint unease began to creep in. Her suitcase, which she had promised to unpack later, never moved from the hallway. Slowly, her clothes began spilling into my closet. The guest room she occupied became a fortress, the door always closed. When I knocked, she would snap, "Busy." She stopped coming on errands with me. She stopped making coffee. Instead, she slept late and left me notes on the fridge with lists of things I should pick up for her: almond milk, protein bars, vitamins that cost more than my weekly groceries. Still, I pushed down the doubt. I told myself this was temporary, that divorce had made her fragile, that she needed time. I remembered the night she had arrived, crying in the rain, and clung to that memory. I didn't see then that her tears had been the opening act. I didn't realize the rain-soaked girl on my porch was already planning how to make my home hers. I mistook her neediness for reconciliation, and in doing so, I opened the door to something much darker. Because when my daughter returned that night, suitcase in hand and eyes red from tears, it wasn't just a visit. It was the beginning of the cage she would build around me, one demand at a time. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part that still haunts me. If she had stormed in demanding everything from the beginning, maybe I would have found the strength to resist. But she was careful. She was patient. She tightened the rope around me slowly, loop by loop, until I couldn't move without her say-so. It began with little corrections. "Mom, don't buy generic detergent. It ruins the fabric." "Mom, don't keep the door unlocked. It's not safe." At first, I thought she was just being thoughtful, maybe even protective. But soon, those corrections sharpened into commands. "Why would you wear that old cardigan? You look senile. Stop going out with cash in your purse. Someone will scam you." The tone changed. No longer a daughter advising her mother, but a supervisor criticizing her employee. Then came the money. One afternoon, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, her laptop open. "You're too trusting, Mom. At your age, people take advantage. You need me to manage your accounts." I shook my head, saying I'd handled my finances fine for 40 years as a legal secretary. But she pushed the laptop closer, her eyes hard. "You can't even remember salt in the soup. Do you really think you can keep track of online banking?" Her words cut deeper than I admitted. I handed her my debit card, telling myself it was temporary, just until she got back on her feet. She smiled like she had won something. A week later, she handed me $30 in cash. "Your allowance," she said lightly. "Don't spend it all at once." Allowance. For the first time in my life, I felt like a child in my own house. From there, she tightened her grip. She set up automatic transfers from my pension account into hers, calling it family consolidation. She changed the mailing address on bank statements so they went straight to her desk at work. When I asked to see them, she laughed. "Don't worry, Mom. You wouldn't understand half the jargon anyway." The house itself stopped feeling like mine. She redecorated the living room, moving my old sofa to the curb without asking. She painted the walls a cold gray I never liked. When I protested, she tossed me a magazine. "You want this place to look like a retirement home?" I'm increasing the property value. One evening, she brought home papers and laid them in front of me. "It's just legal housekeeping," she said, "adding my name to the deed. Easier in case something happens to you." I hesitated, staring at the lines of print. She sighed dramatically and added, "Don't you trust your own daughter?" After all I've sacrificed? My hand shook as I signed. That night, lying in bed, I whispered the words that had begun to haunt me. "I'm just a walking debit card." I had thought bringing her home would heal the rift between us. Instead, every gesture of kindness became another link in the chain. I gave her a place to stay. She took the whole house. I offered her support. She claimed ownership. I could feel the air in the house changing. The pictures on the walls, my wedding photo, snapshots of family holidays, felt like silent witnesses to my surrender. Every object in every room seemed to remind me of the control she had gained. The kettle I used to boil water at dawn was now set on a timer she bought. The mailbox key sat in her purse, not mine. Even the spare bedroom that once welcomed guests was locked with a code I didn't know. I moved through my own house like a tenant on probation. Sometimes at night I caught her looking at me with a strange mix of triumph and disdain, like she had finally bent me into the shape she wanted. She never said it out loud, but I could hear it in the silence between us. This house, this pension, this life, it's mine now. And I realized too late that the rain-soaked girl who had begged for shelter was gone. What remained was a woman who knew exactly how to tighten the noose, one silent knot at a time. There are nights when I lie awake staring at the ceiling and all I can think is this. I did this to myself. Every bruise, every humiliation, every dollar that vanished from my account carries my own fingerprints. People might say Lauren manipulated me, that she twisted my love into chains. But the truth is, I handed her the rope. I think back to when she was 8, the day her father walked out. He left with a suitcase and a muttered excuse, and suddenly it was just the two of us. She sat on the couch, clutching her stuffed rabbit, asking me if Daddy would come back. I promised her he would. I lied. And when I realized he wouldn't, I swore to myself that she would never feel abandoned again. I worked 40 years as a legal secretary at Sullivan and Finch. Long hours, endless stacks of depositions, the hum of copy machines. My back ached, my eyes burned, but I kept going because every paycheck meant ballet lessons, piano tutors, field trips, braces. When other parents said no, I always said yes. Yes to summer camp. Yes to private school uniforms. Yes to college applications out of state. I believed that sacrifice was the purest form of love. If I carried the weight, she would be free to soar. But maybe I should have said no more often. Maybe I should have let her face disappointment, let her scrape her knees on life's pavement instead of laying down rugs everywhere she walked. Instead, I smoothed every path. I bailed her out when she overdrew her first checking account. I paid for the credit card she maxed in college. I covered rent when she lost her first job. Each time I told myself, she's young, she'll learn. But she didn't. Why would she, when she always had me? The memory that stings most is the piano recital. She was 12. She hadn't practiced, but I paid extra for the dress she wanted, the one with the satin sash. She stumbled through the performance, her fingers clumsy on the keys. Afterward, she threw her sheet music on the floor and shouted, "You embarrassed me." And still, I hugged her and whispered, "You were wonderful." I swallowed the truth because I was terrified she would stop loving me. Even now, at 61, I catch myself doing the same thing. I hide the bruises with makeup, I scrub soup stains off the floor, I sign over deeds, all because I think if I just endure a little longer, she'll love me again. But love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't demand silence. Lying in bed last night, I realized the cruelest truth. I didn't just spoil her. I trained her. I trained her to see me as a resource, not a mother. A walking debit card, nothing more. Every time I said yes when I should have said no, I carved away a piece of my authority. Every time I hid her mistakes from others, I taught her the world would bend to her. And now, when she looks at me, she doesn't see a woman. She sees an account to drain, a house to control, a servant to order around. The weight of that realization is heavier than the burns on my cheek. I can endure pain. I can endure hunger. But the thought that I raised my own jailer, that is the wound that never closes. Sometimes I replay our lives in my head, trying to spot the moment where I went wrong. Was it when I worked late and missed her first school play? Was it when I saved up for her ballet lessons instead of fixing the leaking roof? Was it when I hugged her after she screamed at me instead of holding her accountable? If I could go back, would I have the courage to let her fail? But the past is carved in stone, and regret does not change the present. What I have now is a daughter who orders me to cover burns with expensive makeup while she smiles for her colleagues. A daughter who signs herself onto my house and calls it hers. A daughter who believes she owns me. And yet, even in this pit of guilt, a voice inside me whispers, "You are not powerless. You are not finished. You can choose differently now." I don't know yet what that choice will look like. I only know that if I keep blaming myself without acting, the blame will become my coffin. I have to find the courage to use these years of regret not as chains but as fuel. Because if I don't, she will keep tightening the noose until there is nothing left of me. Every wall in this house once carried laughter. I can still hear echoes of birthday songs in the dining room, the sound of little feet pounding up the stairs, the clatter of dishes during Thanksgiving when relatives crowded in. This house was supposed to be my sanctuary, the reward for decades of working late nights and skipping vacations. I bought it brick by brick, check by check, with the dream that one day it would be filled with warmth even after I was gone. Now it feels like a prison. The living room, once painted a soft cream, is now covered in gray she insisted on. Cold, impersonal, the color of storm clouds that never pass. My old sofa, worn but comfortable, was dragged to the curb without a word. She replaced it with a stiff leather sectional that squeaks when I sit down, as though warning me not to stay too long. The kitchen, where I once taught her to stir cookie batter, has become a command center. She sits at the table in her business suit, giving me orders as though she were running a board meeting. The kettle I used to use freely is now set on a timer she controls. Even the grocery lists are dictated. Almond milk, imported olives, protein shakes I can't even pronounce. My own preferences, oatmeal, black tea, canned soup, disappear from the pantry like contraband. The hallway carries new locks, coded pads I never asked for. She installed them after claiming break-ins were common in our neighborhood. But the only one those locks keep out is me. Rooms I used to clean with pride are now forbidden. The guest room, once full of quilts and spare linens, is locked. She calls it her office, but I have never been allowed inside. At night, the silence presses down hardest. I move through the house barefoot, careful not to make the floors creak, because any sound risks her sharp voice from upstairs. Keep it down, Mom. Some of us have real jobs. I retreat to my bedroom like a prisoner returning to her cell, clutching the quilt I sewed 30 years ago, the only thing she hasn't touched. I see my life shrinking. The front porch, where I used to sip coffee at sunrise, is now her smoking spot, littered with ashtrays. The garden where I once grew roses is neglected, weeds climbing through the soil while she tells me it's a waste of time. Even the photographs on the walls have been altered. My wedding picture vanished. Family photos from holidays disappeared. In their place are framed certificates of her achievements, her degree, her promotions, her awards. My history erased, replaced by her resume. Neighbors notice. Mrs. Caldwell asked me once why the curtains are always closed now. She used to see me watering flowers or sitting on the porch with a book. Now she only catches glimpses of me taking out the trash, my eyes downcast. I mumble excuses, but she doesn't believe them. I can see pity in her eyes. I used to think home was a fortress against the world. Now I know it can become the tightest cage. The very walls I paid for echo back my daughter's orders. The furniture I once arranged now enforces her control. I walk the halls and feel the weight of invisible chains. And what hurts most is not the control itself, it's the loss of safety. This house was supposed to be the place where I could rest, where I could finally breathe after years of labor. Instead, it has turned against me. The walls whisper that I am not free. The windows show me a world outside, but they might as well be bars. I tuck myself into bed each night telling myself I still own this house, that my name is still etched in the records at City Hall. But deep down, I know ownership means nothing when someone else holds the keys. I am a guest in my own home, a prisoner in the place I thought would cradle me until the end of my days. And in that realization, a quiet grief grows. Because losing your house to the bank is one thing, losing it to your own child is something else entirely. The call came on a Wednesday morning, just as I was folding laundry in the living room. The phone buzzed against the coffee table, and for a moment I considered ignoring it. Most calls were junk these days, or telemarketers offering extended warranties for cars I didn't own anymore. But the number on the screen wasn't one I recognized, and something about the area code tugged at me. Columbus Business District. I answered softly, "Hello?" A man's voice replied, steady and professional. "Mrs. Miller?" "My name is Raymond. I'm the chief accountant at Northgate Business Solutions. I need a few minutes of your time." The mention of Northgate froze me. That was Lauren's company. I glanced toward the staircase, half expecting her to come storming down, but the house was quiet. "Yes?" I whispered. He cleared his throat, polite but firm. "I'm contacting you because we've detected several unusual transfers from our corporate accounts. The activity is tied to your name, specifically your bank account." My knees nearly gave out. I sank into the armchair, clutching the phone tighter. "That can't be right," I stammered. "I'm retired. I don't handle business accounts." "That's why I'm reaching out," Raymond continued. "The transfers are significant." Multiple transactions in the tens of thousands. The most recent, $60,000, was flagged for review. I pressed my palm to my forehead, trying to make sense of his words. No, there must be a mistake. I don't even have access to anything like that, Mrs. Miller, he said gently. The deposits are showing as received into your personal savings account. My breath caught. I wanted to deny it, but the truth prickled at the back of my mind. Lauren had insisted on handling all my banking, my pension, even the online accounts. She had all my logins, my debit card, everything. I forced the words out. My daughter. She manages my finances. She works for Northgate. There was a pause on the other end. Then Raymond's voice dropped lower. That explains a lot. He chose his next words carefully, as though measuring them on a scale. Mrs. Miller, I need you to come into the office. Quietly. We'll review this together. I don't want to speculate over the phone, but you need to see these records with your own eyes. My heart raced. Images flashed in my mind. Lauren smirking across the kitchen table. Lauren telling me I couldn't be trusted with money. Lauren sliding papers in front of me to sign. Suddenly, the pieces clicked together, forming a picture I had refused to see. I swallowed hard. When? Tomorrow, if possible. I'll set a private appointment. You won't have to go through the front desk. Discretion is important. The word discretion struck me. He wasn't just asking. He was warning. I thanked him in a shaky voice and hung up. The silence in the living room was suffocating. The laundry lay forgotten in my lap as I stared at the blank television screen across from me. My reflection wavered on the glass, pale and frightened. Upstairs, I heard Lauren's footsteps. She was awake now, moving confidently through the house, humming to herself. The sound made my skin crawl. She had no idea what call I had just received, or maybe she would sense it in my face. I forced myself to stand, gathering the laundry, folding with stiff, mechanical movements. When she walked into the room a few minutes later, dressed sharply in another tailored suit, she gave me a cursory glance. Coffee. I carried the mug to her, careful not to spill. My hands trembled, not from age, but from the storm gathering inside me. I wanted to scream the truth I had just heard. I wanted to throw the words in her face. I know what you're doing. I know what you've done. But fear welded my lips shut. She took the cup, sipped, and smiled faintly. Perfect. Don't forget lunch later. Maya's bringing the team again. Then she turned on her heel, grabbing her handbag and keys, and left without another word. The door closed. The house fell silent. And I stood there, clutching the edge of the table, realizing my world had shifted in one phone call. This wasn't just about soup or insults or control anymore. It wasn't just about bruises or humiliations whispered behind closed doors. It had spilled into the outside world, into her workplace, into a corporation with accountants and records and investigators. For the first time, I saw a crack in her armor, a path out of the prison she had built. But that path terrified me as much as it beckoned, because stepping onto it meant exposing not just her sins, but mine. If money had been funneled through my accounts, if papers carried my signature, I was no longer just the victim. I was a piece of the crime. I pressed my forehead against the cool wood of the table and whispered, God, what do I do? The only answer was the faint hum of the refrigerator, steady and indifferent, as if reminding me the world didn't stop for my fear. But inside, I knew one thing with certainty. Tomorrow, I would walk into Northgate's tower, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. The next day arrived with a weight I could feel in my bones. I had agreed to meet Raymond, but before that could happen, Lauren had other plans. She swept into the kitchen early, her heels clicking on the tile like a metronome of control. Maya's hosting a little lunch today, she announced as if it were carved in stone. Colleagues from the office. You'll serve, of course, and don't forget the concealer. She placed the pink box back on the counter with a sharp tap. I stared at it. the expensive little lie in powdered form. My cheek still burned from the soup incident, the skin raw and tender beneath the beige mask. I dabbed it on anyway because refusing wasn't an option. By noon, the house was filled with voices I didn't recognize. Laughter, chatter, the clinking of glasses. Maya floated in wearing another bright dress, her perfume trailing through the air like sugar. She hugged me briefly before darting off to help arrange platters on the dining table. "So lovely of you, Mrs. Miller." "You always make everything perfect," she said, though we both knew the food had been cooked by me alone. I carried trays of sandwiches and salad bowls, setting them on the long table. My hands shook, but I forced myself to smile. I was invisible in my own kitchen, reduced to a hostess no one thanked. Most of the young women laughed and swapped office stories, their polished nails flashing as they gestured. Then I saw her. At the far end of the table, setting down her bag and smoothing her blazer, was my sister, Emily. My breath caught in my throat. Of all people, why her? She had just started as in-house counsel at Northgate, a position she had proudly told me about weeks earlier over the phone. I hadn't told her about my situation with Lauren. How could I? Pride had tied my tongue. And now, here she was, seated with Lauren's colleagues, her sharp eyes scanning the room like they always did. She didn't see me at first. She was too busy greeting Maya, offering a polite handshake. But when her gaze finally fell on me, everything slowed. Her smile faded. Her eyes narrowed. She saw the stiff way I moved, the forced grin that didn't reach my eyes. And then her gaze dropped to my cheek. The concealer hadn't hidden everything. Beneath the beige mask, faint traces of the burn peeked through, a mottled red line near my jaw. Emily's expression changed in an instant, concern flashing across her face before she masked it with a lawyer's calm. I nearly dropped the tray I was holding. My hands tightened on the handles and I ducked my head quickly, pretending to fuss with the silverware. I wanted to hide, but Emily had already seen too much. Lauren breezed in then, her voice carrying over the table. "Everyone, this is my mother. She's retired now, so she loves having company. Don't let her fool you, she lives for this." She laughed, a brittle, false sound. A few colleagues chuckled politely. Emily didn't laugh. She kept her eyes on me, her lips pressed into a thin line. Throughout lunch, I avoided her gaze. I poured water, refilled plates, carried empty dishes back to the kitchen. My heart pounded every time I walked past her chair. I could feel her watching me, reading me the way only a sister could. When the laughter swelled and attention drifted away, Emily leaned slightly toward me as I passed with a tray of cups. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "We need to talk." I froze, the words striking deeper than I expected. I didn't answer, didn't dare nod, but she saw the flicker in my eyes, the silent plea I couldn't voice. She set her glass down carefully, her lawyer's face returning as she turned back to the group. The rest of the lunch blurred. I moved like a ghost, carrying plates, smiling when spoken to, hiding my trembling hands. Lauren basked in the spotlight, laughing too loudly, tossing her hair, bragging about her latest projects at work. She never noticed the silent exchange that had passed between her aunt and her mother. When it was over, the women gathered their handbags and coats, thanking Lauren for the invitation. Maya gushed about the food, patting my arm with false sweetness before leaving. Lauren waved them out with a satisfied grin, her facade of perfection intact. Emily lingered. She adjusted her blazer slowly, then leaned close enough that I could smell her perfume, subtle and steady, just like her. Her words were soft, but they pierced through the fog of humiliation around me. I saw. "We'll talk soon. You're not alone, Bea." For the first time in years, my knees nearly gave out, not from fear, but from relief. Someone had finally noticed, someone I trusted. Lauren clapped her hands suddenly. "Mom, clean up!" Chop chop. She didn't even glance at Emily, already moving upstairs to change. I gathered plates with trembling hands, my heart pounding. Emily's words echoed in my mind, louder than the clatter of dishes. "You're not alone." And in that moment, a flicker of hope lit inside me. Faint, fragile, but real. The next morning, I walked into Northgate's Commerce Tower with my stomach twisted in knots. The glass doors reflected back a woman I barely recognized, shoulders slumped, makeup uneven, clutching a worn handbag like it was a shield. I hadn't stepped into an office building since retiring, and now every polished tile and echo of high heels made me feel like an intruder. Raymond was waiting near the security desk, tall, silver-haired, with a calm face that reminded me of the attorneys I used to work for. He didn't smile when he saw me, but his nod was kind enough. "Mrs. Miller, this way, please." He led me through a quiet corridor into a small conference room. No windows, just a table, 2 chairs, and a neat stack of folders waiting in the center. My throat tightened at the sight of them. Raymond pulled out a chair for me. "Please sit." He opened the top folder and slid a page toward me. "This is the first transfer we flagged. $52,000, routed directly from a Northgate account into a savings account under your name." I stared at the paper. My name was printed clearly beside the numbers, my account number, my balance. Except the money had never been mine. I would have noticed, wouldn't I? He flipped to the next page, then another. 17,000. Same path, same destination. And finally, this one. He tapped the third page. 60,000 routed just last week. My hand shook as I lifted the page closer. There it was again. My name, my account. The dates matched the weeks Lauren had snapped at me for asking about money. "This isn't possible," I whispered. I never touched this." Raymond folded his hands. "I believe you. The pattern suggests someone else had access, but the fact remains, the transfers point to you on paper." The room spun. My ears rang. I thought about Lauren sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop, telling me I was too old to manage online banking. I remembered her handing me $30 like pocket change while she moved entire paychecks through my name. Why would she do this? I asked, though deep down, I already knew. Raymond sighed. "It appears your daughter used your account as a shield. Funds are missing from multiple project budgets. The trail ends in your savings. It looks like embezzlement, and unless proven otherwise, the company could see you as complicit." The word complicit stabbed me. I saw headlines flashing through my mind. Retired secretary caught laundering money for daughter. Neighbors whispering. Emily shaking her head. Caldwell avoiding my eyes. Raymond's voice softened. "I asked you here because I don't think you're involved. I've worked with numbers long enough to know when something doesn't add up, and your record shows nothing but stability for decades. But Mrs. Miller, you need to understand, if this continues, you will be the one left carrying the blame." Tears burned at the corners of my eyes. I pressed my hands flat against the table, forcing myself to breathe evenly. "What do I do?" He slid another folder toward me. "Here are the transaction logs, wire transfers, timestamps, account details. Keep them safe. If anyone questions you, these will help." His eyes locked onto mine. "And Mrs. Miller, you may want to consider speaking with someone outside the company, a lawyer, maybe even the district attorney's office." The mention of law chilled me. For 40 years, I had filed briefs, typed motions, organized cases. I had been surrounded by justice every day, and yet I had never imagined I would need protection from my own child. I clutched the folder to my chest as if it were a lifeline. Raymond stood and walked me to the elevator. Before I stepped inside, he placed a hand lightly on my arm. "Be careful. If your daughter realizes you know, she may not react well." His words followed me all the way home, louder than the hum of the elevator, sharper than the city traffic outside. When I stepped into the kitchen, Lauren was there, lounging at the table with a glass of wine, though it was barely noon. She looked me up and down, eyes narrowing at the folder clutched in my hands. "What's that?" she asked casually, but her tone was edged with suspicion. I forced a smile, tucking the folder quickly into my bag. Just old papers. Nothing important. Her gaze lingered, but she didn't press further. She sipped her wine and smirked. Don't forget, Maya's dropping by later. Try not to embarrass me. I retreated upstairs, my heart hammering, the folder heavy in my bag. For the first time, I had proof, hard evidence that the cage around me wasn't just emotional, it was criminal. But with that proof came a new terror, because paper trails don't care about intentions. On every page, the thief wasn't Lauren, it was me. That evening, after Maya had left and the dishes were stacked high in the sink, Lauren cornered me in the hallway. Her wine glass was still in her hand, half full, the stem glinting under the light. She leaned against the wall, blocking my path like a sentry. "You've been quiet today," she said. Her tone was almost playful, but her eyes were sharp. "Anything you want to tell me, Mom?" I gripped the strap of my handbag tighter, the folder from Raymond hidden inside. My throat went dry. "Nothing," I murmured. Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You know, sometimes I worry about you. You forget things. You misplace salt, you burn soup, you leave doors unlocked. People talk about dementia starting early. It's sad, really." She took a slow sip of wine, watching me over the rim of the glass. My stomach churned. I tried to step past her, but she shifted slightly, forcing me back against the wall. "You know what they do with women like that?" she whispered, her voice dropping lower. "They send them away. To facilities, to homes, where no one listens when they scream, where no one believes them when they say they're fine. I've read the reports. Once the paperwork says unstable, that's it. Your word means nothing." I felt the blood drain from my face. She tilted her head, studying me like a cat with a trapped mouse. "So here's the thing, Mom. If you ever get the idea to start talking to anyone, remember how easy it would be for me to convince people you're losing your mind. I work in corporate. I know people. You'd be signed away faster than you can spell your own name." My knees trembled. "Lauren, please." Her voice hardened, no trace of softness left. "Don't test me. Don't think you can go behind my back. One word from me and you'll be locked in some sterile room with linoleum floors, staring at the ceiling while strangers feed you gelatin with plastic spoons. Do you want that?" I shook my head, my hands trembling. "Good." She straightened, finishing the last of her wine. She set the glass on the hallway table with a sharp clink. "Then keep quiet. About everything. About the money. About me. Smile when I tell you to. Cover the burns. And for God's sake, stop looking like you're plotting something. You're terrible at hiding it." I pressed myself against the wall as she walked away, her heels clicking against the wood floor. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to collapse, to sink into the floor, but fear held me rigid. I stumbled into my room and locked the door, my breaths coming in shallow gasps. The folder in my bag felt like it was burning through the fabric, daring me to look at it again. Proof of her crimes, yes, but also a rope she could twist around my neck with a single accusation of instability. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the bag to my chest. Her words echoed in my mind. "No one will believe you. They'll think you're losing your mind." Tears welled in my eyes. For years, I had told myself I could endure anything if it meant keeping the peace. But this was different. This wasn't just control. It was the threat of erasure. To be stripped of credibility, declared insane, silenced forever. That terrified me more than bruises or burns ever could. I thought of my years at Sullivan and Finch, of the files I had typed for attorneys fighting to keep clients out of guardianships, out of facilities where they were stripped of autonomy. I remembered the glazed eyes of clients in those cases. People who had been declared incompetent when in truth they were simply old, simply alone. The image of myself in that place rose up so vividly, I nearly gagged. A white room, a locked door. My voice ignored. My daughter visiting once a month, smiling sweetly for the nurses while she drained what was left of my accounts. I pressed my fists against my temples and whispered, "No, not me. Not like that." The door creaked suddenly and I jumped, but it was only the wind rattling a loose frame. Still, my heart wouldn't slow. I sat there for hours, clutching the folder. Every sound in the house magnified. Her footsteps upstairs, the creak of pipes, the hum of the refrigerator. That night, I barely slept. When I did drift off, I dreamed of padded walls and nameless orderlies dragging me down a hallway, while Lauren signed papers with a smile. When I woke, the decision was carved into me like stone. I could not stay silent anymore. Fear of an asylum was nothing compared to the hell of losing myself completely. But if I was to fight back, I would need help, and I would need proof stronger than her threats. The next morning, I found Mrs. Caldwell waiting by her fence as I took the trash out. Her gray hair was pulled into a bun, her arms crossed over a thick cardigan. She had that look she always wore when she knew something but was deciding whether to speak it. "Bee," she said softly, "you've been quieter than usual. And I've seen the bruises. Don't tell me they're from tripping on the stairs." My throat tightened. I wanted to deny it, to hide behind excuses like I always had. But something about her steady gaze, sharp and kind all at once, cracked me open. My eyes filled with tears. She nodded as if she'd expected that answer without me saying a word. Then she leaned closer. "I did something, Bee. I hope you won't be angry." She pulled a small black device from her pocket, a camera, compact and sleek. "I put this facing your back porch. I didn't want to pry, but I couldn't stand by any longer. Last night, it caught everything. The world seemed to tilt beneath me." "Everything," I whispered. Her jaw tightened. The threats. Her voice. The way she cornered you in that hallway. I heard it all. If she tries to paint you as unstable, I've got proof she's the one unhinged. My knees nearly gave out. I grabbed the fence post for support, a sob breaking loose from my chest. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt the faintest sense of safety. Mrs. Caldwell reached across the fence and squeezed my hand. "You're not alone in this. And you don't have to keep suffering in silence. I know someone who can help. An old friend, Helena, assistant district attorney. She handles cases like yours. If you're ready, I'll take you to her." The name rang in my ears. District attorney. My pulse spiked with fear. Going to the law meant stepping into a spotlight I had spent years avoiding. It meant exposing not just Lauren, but myself. Those transfers, those signatures, the paper trail that carried my name. I can't, I stammered. If they see the accounts, they'll think I was part of it. Caldwell shook her head firmly. "That's what abusers do, Bee. They trap you, make you think you're guilty. But the evidence will show who pulled the strings. Helena will know what to do." Her voice was so certain, so unwavering that a sliver of hope cut through my dread. That afternoon when Lauren was at work, Caldwell drove me downtown. The courthouse loomed above us, tall and imposing, the kind of place I used to file papers for without ever imagining I'd step inside for myself. Helena met us in her office, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a calm presence. She didn't waste time with pity. She listened. She asked questions. She watched me closely, but not with doubt, with focus. When Caldwell set the camera on the desk and played the recording, Helena leaned forward, her expression hardening. Lauren's voice filled the office. "One word from me and you'll be locked in some sterile room. No one will believe you." Helena's jaw tightened. When the recording ended, she sat back, her hands steepled. "Mrs. Miller, this is clear evidence of coercion and abuse." Coupled with the financial records, we can build a strong case. But it depends on you. Are you willing to stand against your daughter? The question sliced through me. Images flashed in my mind. Lauren at 8 years old clutching her stuffed rabbit. Lauren at 12 in her satin recital dress. Lauren standing in the rain the night she came back. My little girl. My tormentor. I swallowed hard. My hands trembled on my lap, but my voice came out steadier than I expected. Yes, I can't live like this anymore. Helena nodded once, decisive. Good. Then here's what we'll do. I'll initiate a financial investigation. Raymond's evidence will be crucial. We'll file charges for embezzlement and domestic abuse. But you must be ready. Your daughter will fight back, and she will try to destroy your credibility. The more honest you are, the less power she has. Her words struck deep. Honest. That meant the mistakes I'd hidden for years might come to light. The corners I'd cut at work, the unreported cash payments, the secrets I prayed would never surface. But maybe this was the only way through. Truth, laid bare, no matter how ugly. Caldwell touched my shoulder gently. You don't have to do this alone, Bee. We're with you. For the first time in so long, I let myself believe it. Maybe I wasn't doomed to be silent forever. Maybe, with allies beside me, I could finally fight back. 2 days after Helena laid out the plan, another envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, just my name scrawled across the front in Lauren's unmistakable handwriting. My hands shook as I carried it inside. I already knew this wasn't going to be a letter of love. I sat at the kitchen table staring at it for a long time before finally tearing it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. My heart stopped when I saw what it was. A photocopy of old documents, receipts, handwritten notes, even slips from cash transactions at Sullivan and Finch. Tucked between them was a photograph of me, younger, sitting at my desk with a brown envelope in my hand. Across the bottom of the page, in Lauren's sharp script, were the words, "Funny how the IRS loves forgotten envelopes. Tax evasion, Mom? How will Helena like this story?" My vision blurred. It was like being punched in the stomach. These were records I had almost forgotten, ghosts from decades ago. There had been times when attorneys slipped me cash for overtime, for favors never billed through payroll. Nothing illegal by their standards, just under-the-table gratitude. I had taken it because I needed every penny for Lauren's ballet shoes, her music lessons, her school trips. I told myself I would make it up later, that it wasn't enough to matter. But here it was, staring back at me, weaponized by my own daughter. I gripped the edge of the table, the wood digging into my palms. My mind spiraled back to those nights in the office. The fluorescent lights humming, the endless stacks of papers, the partners handing me sealed envelopes with a wink. I remembered sliding them into my purse, my heart racing, telling myself it was survival, not theft, and then rushing home to place the money into piano lesson envelopes, watching Lauren smile as if the world owed her luxury. Now those choices, buried and rationalized, threatened to drag me down with her. She had the evidence, and she knew exactly how to use it. If this went public, if the IRS came knocking, I wouldn't just be a victim of her embezzlement. I'd be branded a criminal, too. I folded the paper with shaking hands, stuffing it back into the envelope. My chest heaved with panic. I wanted to run to Caldwell, to Helena, to anyone who might tell me it wasn't as bad as it looked. But my own guilt silenced me. They would see the truth. I had cut corners. I had sinned in small ways, and Lauren had kept the receipts. The kitchen walls seemed to close in. The gray paint she had chosen pressed down on me like smoke. My head throbbed with memories I couldn't outrun. Lauren at 12 stomping her foot, demanding a new dress I couldn't afford. Me slipping extra bills from an envelope marked trial prep to make it happen. Her teenage years when she rolled her eyes at the word budget. And I pulled from the cash stash in my dresser to keep her happy. Every choice was flashing back now, a ledger of mistakes I thought were buried. I stumbled into my bedroom and pulled the curtains shut. The envelope sat on the dresser like a coiled snake. I couldn't look at it, but I couldn't throw it away either. It was proof of my failures and also proof of her cruelty. Lying in bed, I felt the weight of two truths pressing against me. 1. My daughter was ruthless, willing to drag me through hell to protect herself. 2. I had given her the ammunition long before this battle began. My thoughts twisted darker as the night dragged on. If Helena saw those papers, would she still believe me? Or would she see just another old woman who had dipped her hands into the wrong pot, now crying victim to cover her own sins? I whispered into the dark, "Maybe I deserve this." The words tasted bitter, but then another voice rose inside me, quieter but stronger. "No, you don't deserve her cruelty. Mistakes don't mean slavery. Guilt doesn't mean prison." I clung to that thought like a lifeline, even as tears soaked my pillow. Lauren wanted me paralyzed, lost in shame, too broken to fight back. But shame wasn't going to save me. If anything, it might be the key. Because secrets only have power in the dark. If I dragged mine into the light before she could use them, maybe, just maybe, I could cut the leash she held on my throat. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake, rehearsing in my mind what it would mean to confess, to own every mistake, to strip Lauren of her weapon. It terrified me, but so did the thought of staying silent. When dawn broke, pale light spilling through the blinds, I sat up and pressed my palms together. For the first time in years, I prayed. Not for Lauren to change, not for the past to be erased, but for the courage to stand in front of the world and say, "Yes, I failed, but I am not her prisoner anymore." The courthouse steps felt heavier than any mountain I had ever climbed. I clutched the railing, my palms slick with sweat, as cameras clicked from every angle. Reporters shouted questions I could barely process, their voices echoing in my skull. I wasn't used to attention. I had spent my entire life behind desks, filing other people's stories. Now my own was being dragged into the light. Helena walked beside me, calm and steady, her briefcase swinging at her side. She leaned close as we pushed through the doors. "You don't have to embellish. Just tell the truth. Secrets lose their power once they're spoken." Her words anchored me. I kept repeating them in my head as she guided me into the press room. A wall of microphones waited, the seal of Franklin County looming large behind the podium. Rows of faces stared back, journalists, colleagues from Northgate, even strangers drawn by curiosity. My knees threatened to give out, but Emily's eyes met mine from the front row, sharp and supportive. Mrs. Caldwell sat beside her, hands folded tightly in her lap, nodding at me with fierce encouragement. Helena gave a brief introduction, outlining the charges under investigation. Then she stepped aside and gestured for me to take the podium. My throat closed, but my legs moved forward as if pulled by a force stronger than fear. I gripped the wooden sides of the podium, feeling every groove under my fingertips. The microphones buzzed faintly, demanding my voice. "My name is Beatrice Miller," I began, my voice trembling. "I am 61 years old, and I am here because I can't live in silence anymore." A hush fell over the room. I drew a breath, deeper this time. For months, I have endured things no mother should face. My daughter, Lauren Miller, has hurt me in ways I never imagined possible. She has thrown things at me. She has left bruises on my body and fear in my heart. She has controlled my finances, my home, my life. My voice cracked, but I forced myself on. She told me to cover my burns and smile. She told me no one would believe me. She told me I'd be locked away if I ever spoke. Gasps rippled through the audience. I pressed my hands harder against the podium, grounding myself. "But I am speaking now," I said, stronger, "because silence has nearly destroyed me, and because there are women out there like me, hiding behind makeup, hiding behind locked doors, hiding behind excuses. I want them to know the truth. Silence doesn't protect you. It protects the abuser. I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat. This was the moment Helena had warned me about, the moment when I would bear not just her sins, but mine. I also need to be honest about my own mistakes, I said, my voice lower but steady. When I worked as a legal secretary, there were times I accepted cash under the table. I told myself it was harmless. I told myself it was for my daughter's future. But secrets rot when they're hidden, and mine have weighed on me for decades. I would rather face judgment for my mistakes than remain a prisoner in my own home. The words came faster now, tumbling out, unstoppable. Yes, I failed. But I will not let my failures excuse her crimes. I will not let my guilt be used as her weapon. The room was silent, cameras clicking softly in the background. I lifted my chin. Better to face my mistakes than to keep living as my daughter's prisoner. Better to stand here, exposed and trembling, than to sit at home with my mouth shut and my dignity gone. For the first time in years, my shoulders straightened. I looked out over the crowd and saw tears glistening in Caldwell's eyes. Emily nodding fiercely, Helena watching me with quiet pride. I stepped back from the podium, my chest heaving, my palms damp, but lighter than I had felt in decades. Helena returned to the microphones, her voice crisp and commanding. You have just heard testimony that will form part of the prosecution's case against Lauren Miller. The investigation is ongoing, but today marks the beginning of accountability. Reporters erupted with questions, but Helena ushered me aside, shielding me as she always promised she would. My knees shook, but my heart pounded with something new. Not fear, not shame, but freedom. I had spoken, and no matter what happened next, I was no longer silent. The air inside Northgate's top-floor conference room was cold, almost sterile, the kind of space designed to intimidate. Tall glass windows overlooked Columbus, the skyline sharp against the afternoon sun. I sat quietly at the edge of the room, Emily on one side of me, Helena on the other. My hands trembled against my lap, but their presence steadied me. The door opened sharply and Lauren walked in. Her heels clicked against the polished floor, her beige suit immaculate, her makeup flawless. She wore a smile I knew too well, polished, professional, utterly false. She glanced at me only once, her lips curving into a smirk, before turning her attention to the head of the table. Marcus, her direct supervisor, waited there, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Raymond had a stack of files, neatly organized, the weight of truth bound in manila folders. Lauren's voice was sweet, practiced. Marcus, thank you for seeing me. I know there's been some confusion with accounts, but I assure you everything is under control. She laughed lightly, as if brushing away a minor inconvenience. But Marcus didn't smile. He folded his hands on the table. Sit down, Lauren. Her steps slowed. She hesitated for the first time, the edges of her confidence fraying. She pulled out a chair, crossed her legs, and tried to keep her voice steady. Of course. Marcus leaned forward. This isn't a conversation about confusion. This is a conversation about theft, about betrayal, and about the end of your career at Northgate. Lauren blinked, her smile flickering. I don't understand. Raymond opened the first folder and slid it across the table. Pages of wire transfers, account logs, spreadsheets, all traced back to her. He opened a second folder showing emails, approvals, documents signed under her credentials. And then Marcus spoke the words I had been waiting for. The investigation confirms that you embezzled $150,000 from corporate funds. You also attempted to sell confidential data. The board has reviewed the findings. The legal team has approved. And the assistant district attorney, he nodded toward Helena, is prepared to move forward with charges. The color drained from Lauren's face. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked around the room, searching for an ally, but found none. Her gaze landed on me, and for the first time in years, I saw fear in her eyes. Her lips curled into a desperate smile. "Mom, tell them. Tell them I was helping you. Tell them you needed the money." I met her gaze, steady, unflinching. "No, Lauren. Not this time." My voice was stronger than I imagined it could be. "You used me. You hurt me, and you will answer for it." She shook her head violently, her composure unraveling. "You can't do this to me. I'm your daughter." Helena's voice cut through the room like steel. "And you're an adult responsible for your crimes." "Blood doesn't excuse fraud or abuse." Marcus stood, his tone final. "Lauren Miller, your employment with Northgate is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out after this meeting. You'll also be hearing from the authorities very soon." Lauren's chair scraped harshly against the floor as she tried to rise, but her legs betrayed her. She stumbled, her knees buckling. The smirk she had worn into the room collapsed completely. Her face went pale, her lips trembling, the flawless mask gone. I watched her unravel, not with triumph, but with release. Chains she had wrapped around me were breaking one by one in front of witnesses who finally saw her as she truly was. Marcus turned to me then, his voice gentler. "Mrs. Miller, on behalf of this company, I want to offer our apology. You were wronged in ways no one should endure. The board has approved a restitution payment of $50,000. And..." He glanced at Emily, then back to me. "If you're willing, we'd like to bring you on as a part-time advisor. $4,200 a month. Your experience, your insight, it deserves respect." Tears blurred my vision. For so long, I had been invisible, treated as nothing more than an inconvenience in my own home. And now, in this room, I was being seen again, not as a burden, but as a woman with worth. Emily squeezed my hand under the table. Caldwell, sitting in the back row, nodded with quiet pride. Helena gave me the smallest smile, her eyes shining with approval. And Lauren. She crumpled in her chair, her face buried in her hands, her empire of control reduced to rubble in a single afternoon. I drew a slow, steady breath. For the first time in years, I wasn't trembling. I was free. That night, the house was quiet in a way I hadn't felt for years. No footsteps pounding above me, no orders shouted from the kitchen, no doors slamming to remind me of my place. Just silence, soft and steady, filling every corner like a balm. Emily stayed after the meeting at Northgate, insisting she wouldn't let me go home alone. Caldwell came too, carrying bags of groceries and a bottle of lavender cleaner. Together, we set about reclaiming the house. Emily started in the living room, pulling Lauren's framed certificates off the walls. She stacked them in a cardboard box and replaced them with old photographs she'd rescued from my closet. My wedding picture. Lauren's kindergarten portrait, back when her smile was real. A faded snapshot of me and Emily in our 20s, arms around each other, laughing in the summer sun. For the first time in years, the walls looked like mine again. Caldwell moved through the kitchen with determined energy, scrubbing every surface until the gray walls smelled faintly of lemon and soap instead of stale wine. She opened windows, letting in the night air. "This house needs to breathe again," she said firmly, and I nodded, tears prickling my eyes. I carried linens into the spare bedroom, folding quilts and smoothing them over the bed. The lock was gone. Emily had ripped it out with a screwdriver, tossing the keypad into the trash. I touched the fresh hole in the wood, a scar that told the truth. No one would bar me from my own rooms again. By the time we finished, the house looked brighter, even in the dim light of table lamps. It was as though the walls themselves had sighed with relief. We sat together in the living room, drinking tea. Emily leaned forward, her elbows on her knees. "She'll try to call you. She might write letters. You don't have to answer, B. Not unless you want to." Caldwell nodded, setting her cup down. Boundaries. That's what you need now. Boundaries and peace. I wrapped my hands around the mug, feeling its warmth seep into me. For so long, I had dreamed of this moment, the day I could sit in my own house without fear. But now that it was here, the weight of it nearly broke me. I began to sob, quietly at first, then harder, until Emily slid beside me and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. Caldwell placed a steady hand on my knee. "It's over," Emily whispered. "She can't hurt you anymore." We stayed like that for a long time, the three of us, holding each other in the glow of the lamp. And when the tears finally stopped, a strange calm settled over me. Later, when the house was still, I walked slowly up the stairs. My bedroom door creaked open, the quilt waiting on the bed. I slipped between the sheets, my body sinking into the familiar mattress. For years, this room had been filled with dread, listening for her footsteps, bracing for her voice. Tonight, there was only silence. I turned on my side, staring at the moonlight spilling across the wall. My chest rose and fell evenly, no hitch, no trembling. For the first time in years, my body wasn't waiting for the next blow, the next order, the next insult. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was deep. No nightmares of padded rooms, no visions of locked doors, just rest. Somewhere in the middle of the night, the phone on my nightstand buzzed. The sound dragged me from sleep. I fumbled in the dark, the screen glowing with a number I knew by heart. Lauren. My finger hovered over the button. For a long moment, I just stared, my breath caught in my throat. Finally, I answered. Her voice was small, broken, nothing like the commanding tone I had lived under. "Mom, please. I can't sleep. I can't eat. They're saying I'll lose everything. I need you." Her words cracked with desperation. "Please forgive me." I closed my eyes. The silence stretched between us, heavy, filled with years of pain. Part of me wanted to hang up. Part of me wanted to scream. But instead, I whispered, steady and quiet, "Not tonight, Lauren." Then I ended the call. The room was still again. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I rolled onto my back, letting the quiet wrap around me like a blanket. For the first time in years, I slept without fear. Morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen, warm and golden, touching the edges of every surface. For years, this light had felt harsh, exposing bruises, illuminating the stains of spilled soup and broken plates. Today, it felt different. Gentle, welcoming. I brewed a pot of coffee, the smell filling the room. No one barked orders at me. No footsteps stormed down the stairs. Just quiet, steady peace. Emily had already left for her office at Northgate, promising she'd stop by after work. Caldwell had called earlier, reminding me she was only a fence away. Their presence lingered like anchors of safety. I sat at the table with my mug, gazing at the stack of papers in front of me. Helena had given them to me after the courthouse, the official documents outlining Lauren's charges, the restitution agreement, and the advisory contract Northgate had offered me. $4,200 a month. A chance not just to survive, but to contribute again. I traced my fingers over the letterhead, my breath steady. For so long, I had believed my life was ending, shrinking into silence, swallowed by my daughter's control. But here was proof that a new chapter could still begin, even at 61. The phone buzzed once on the counter, another call from Lauren's correctional facility. I let it ring until it stopped. My chest tightened, but not with fear, not anymore. I whispered into the quiet, "One day, maybe I'll forgive. But I won't forget." I stood, slipping the documents into a leather folder, and picked up my handbag. Today was my first day at Northgate as a consultant. My steps were slow but steady as I locked the front door behind me. The autumn air was crisp, the city alive with morning traffic. When I reached the tower, the glass doors reflected me back. Not the hunched woman of months before, but someone straighter, stronger. I pushed them open, and the world inside didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like a beginning. As I rode the elevator up, I thought about the words I had spoken at the courthouse. Better to face my mistakes than to live as a prisoner. They echoed now with a different weight, because facing the truth hadn't destroyed me, it had set me free. The doors opened, and I stepped onto the floor with the Northgate logo gleaming across the wall. People passed me with polite nods. Some recognized me, whispering about the woman who had stood against her own daughter. I didn't shrink from their stares. I walked toward Marcus's office, my new contract tucked safely in my bag, and I felt something I hadn't in years. Breath. Full, deep, unbroken breath. I paused by the window overlooking Columbus, the city stretching wide beneath the clear sky. For the first time, the view didn't feel unreachable. It felt like possibility. I murmured to myself, "Secrets lose power when exposed to light." The words tasted true, solid. Then I straightened my shoulders, ready to step into the day, ready to live, not as a victim, but as Beatrice Miller, free, unafraid, and finally, my own.